Say something, guys.
Good afternoon.
And welcome, everybody. As we're live at Jimmy's Grill in Bridgeville, I'm Anthony Joseph, and you're listening to the Anthony Joseph Sports Show.
I'd like to welcome in my special guest this week, George Keller from Dover International Speedway. You've been covering racing for over 61 years.
Yes, I have. I have to blame it on my father. The first race I ever saw was on a Pennsylvania mountainside. The backstretch was lower than the front stretch. The bleachers were actually tree stumps, and there were two cars in the race, and our neighbor won, and it was a very big day. I was 6 years old. I've been hooked since.
That's a fascinating story just for your first time. I'd like to begin things talking about Jimmy Johnson, as he dominated the race last June, as he won for the seventh time, tying Bobby Allison, also the King, Richard Petty. And we're going to show that footage from that day, as it was very close, as Kevin Harvick, the closer, almost won that race. What are your thoughts on that day?
Well, we knew that it was going to be a special day if Jimmy won. He's tied now with two of the sport's greatest ever. Jimmy himself may have the records one day to be considered the best ever. His 5 championships thus far set him in a league of his own. I feel he will tie the King and Dale Earnhardt Sr. before he's done. So we knew it was coming, and we weren't sure when, but we knew it wouldn't be too much longer. The 7 wins tying the King and Bobby.
And the footage that we're watching, Jimmy Johnson in the Madagascar car out front, as he dominated that race last June. As you can see, everybody's bunched up.
That's a restart, pretty obviously. And watching Jimmy Johnson these years, he's to me, he reminds me of David Pearson. It would seem like David Pearson would always laying back. Then with 10 to go, 5 to go, here would come Pearson. Now, as we know, Pearson is the second winningest driver in the history of the sport with 105 versus the King's 200. So Jimmy Johnson is smooth on that racetrack. He can monotonously make laps, lap after lap after lap, to the 1,000th of a second. A couple of years ago, I watched him at our track testing, and he tested there for 2 days straight. I have no idea how many laps he made around the Monster Mile. Probably 700 or 800 in reality, Anthony.
And we can see on that final restart, he got a good jump, and that's why he just pulled away from Kevin Harvick.
Well, there's something about those Hendrick Motors that I would like to think just didn't pull away. He had the horsepower and the torque to get away from Harvick.
And as you can see with that footage, he was doing a burnout. He's just happy when he comes to Dover, because he really likes that racetrack where a lot of them really don't.
That's right. The legacy of the track goes way back. We don't know who it was when they got out of that car in the early days, and as a driver, their comment was, that track is nothing but a monster. They really didn't want to come up north in the first place and run, but when they heard it was a 1-mile high bank super speedway, they were even less interested. You should have seen some of the contraptions they had on their helmets tied to their driver's suits and their shoulders for fear of the G-forces. I'll never forget Fearless Freddie Lorenzen from Elmhurst, Illinois. He came in gangbusters to the Monster Mile. Somewhere along about midway in his first time there, Fearless Freddie had to get out of his car. He needed relief. And the last I saw him there, he was lying on an earthen bank. He didn't look all that fearless to me.
Also, Denny Hamlin, he struggled at the Monster Mile. It seems if you have a bad performance, you just don't like that racetrack. But if you win like Johnson, you want to go there every time.
Well, we have to watch very carefully what we listen to coming out of these guys' mouths and what we believe for sure. just look at who was happy Sunday at Talladega, and look who wasn't.
Right, yes.
Why is that happiness tied to where we finished? And our sadness is tied to where we didn't finish.
That's true, yes. As with Johnson and his 7 victories at the Monster Mile, do you think his aggressive style really suits him at the track?
Well, I think his ability to make these laps without flaw and without air has a lot to do with it. And he seems to be able to do that better than anyone else at this time. Very rarely do you see him out of shape on the racetrack. And if he is, it's usually someone has contributed to that other than him.
And as we mentioned, Richard Petty, 7 victories at the Monster Mile, his last victory in 1984. What's happened that day?
Well, I can pretty well remember that. Being a lifetime Richard Petty fan, that'll never change. We were really excited there at the track that he had a chance to win race number 199 there. And when we saw it happening and realized it was going to be true, we couldn't have been happier for him that day. I remember being in Victory Lane and standing to the left rear of Richard's winning car, and all of a sudden something rustled between my legs, and I looked down and it was a hand, and the guy was trying to tear a decal off the quarter panel of Richard's winning car. I didn't know quite what to do about it then. I was younger, and so what I did is I just closed my legs and wouldn't let him go.
What is your favorite Richard Petty moment?
My favorite Richard Petty moment would be, it wasn't long before he retired in 1992. We did a show at the track called Friday Night Live, and for some reason Richard got there earlier than he was supposed to be, and I was kind of left to entertain Richard, and I had to entertain him an hour and a half. We stood in the wings waiting for his turn to be part of the show, and I said to him, I said, "Do you know I saw you racing your first 500 in Darlington?" And he said back to me, he said, "We're really both getting old, aren't we?" That's my favorite Petty moment.
Speaking of dominating, Harry Gant back in 1991 led 326 laps out of 500. What was it like for you watching Harry Gant just having a spectacular day?
There was never anybody in my mind that was more fun to watch than Harry Gant. Harry Gant was a hard-charging race driver. He was a clean race driver. I don't remember any incidents where Harry had a problem with anybody on the racetrack. So it was a thrill when he won that race at our track in September, and it was during that vintage period of time where he got nicknamed Mr. September. So I've always enjoyed being around Harry.
And during that race back in 91, they had a 15-car pileup that kind of aided Gant's day.
Yes, it did. Now, I don't exactly remember this late in life of who all was involved in that, but I know it took out some of his competition.
And it seemed like Harry Gant also liked the Monster Mile.
Well, we never heard him complain about it, but I would say probably he didn't like it much either before September of 1991.
And he also won in 1992.
Yes, yeah, he backed it up. He had quite a string of victories there for a while.
What is your favorite Harry Gant moment or story that you could share?
Well, I remember kind of been associated with Victory Lane for a long time, and we never really have any genuine trouble down there. But Harry had won the race, and his wife Peg was up in the more or less podium with him in Victory Lane. And this guy behind me started hollering some really obscene things at Mrs. Gant. And I'm only going to take so much because people don't realize I have plainclothes officers there. And I said, all I have to do is look at him. And I said, that guy's got to go. Have you ever seen a man walking down pit road between two other men and his feet aren't touching the ground? It is really funny. So that would have to be my favorite Harry Gant moment.
Sounds like a great one right there. As there was a lot of wrecks throughout the existent as the first race back in 1969 where Richard Petty achieved that victory. Now we're going to go to one of my favorite wrecks, or really stands out in my mind. We're going to have that footage back in 2009. Joey Logano that day. He is really, George, lucky to be alive, as that was a wreck that he really didn't start.
Well, let's check it out here, Anthony, for for our viewers. I can tell you that it's got to be our wildest wreck. In fact, until what you're going to see happen to Joey in the 40 years of racing before then, we had only ever had one car go completely over once. In all those years and all those wrecks, only one complete rollover until Joey came.
Who was it?
I believe it's Donnie Neuenberger, the NASCAR nationwide driver. He's from not far away over here in Maryland.
As we can see, George, he's tumbling over and over.
Now, I run into folks all the time that debate how many times he flipped. For the record, race fans, it was 7.5 times.
7.5
Didn't
times.
make it to 8, and he surely doesn't want to ever.
And some of the comments that I read on YouTube, they were blaming Tony Stewart driving the number 14 Burger King car that led to this wreck. But as I watched it over, he did not cause that wreck, as Martin Truex was in that wreck, and also Reed Sorenson that day.
I'll take your word on it. My vantage point that day, all I saw was yellow and white flipping, so I really didn't see who started it.
As George, we're going to see that once again.
Great. As long as they don't get hurt, we can watch this stuff all night long.
And that was Reed Sorenson in the number 43 car for Richard Petty Motorsports at the time. And that's Logano continuing to
See, there's your
roll
7.5,
over.
folks.
See, there's Tony Stewart in the Burger King car.
All right.
It's the
Well,
Home Depot.
he certainly ran into the back of him, but I don't think it was intentional.
Right, yes. Wasn't like he was...
That's one of those I hated for it to happen.
Right.
What actually caused him to get into that mess is his car got down on the track apron, which is the ribbon of blacktop, and it's flat. And the Monster Mile in that area is banked 24 degrees. So when he hit that apron throws the car out of control, and you see what precipitated the rest of it.
As you can see, he was not injured.
No. I would say Michael McDowell's wreck at Texas was far more violent than this one, but this is the most violent one we've ever had.
As it seems, the safe for burial wall, I think, helped Joey Logano survive that day. Do you think so?
Oh, absolutely, because the inertia that is absorbed when those cars hit is like second to none. Melvin Joseph installed originally there a 5/8 inch thick boilerplate steel wall. And I can tell you one thing, nothing ever sounded better when something hit it, but it would bend, but it wouldn't move. But that was no safer barrier, believe me.
Back in 2009, what was the fan reaction that day? They had to be relieved after they knew that Logano was okay.
With the close viewing there at the Monster Mile, they were abhorred and frightened with the violence of that wreck. We know that when he got out of the car, there was a huge roar and applause for him, which race fans are really good about, respecting someone who puts their life on the line week in and week out, and when something happens to them, all of us fans feel it.
And a lot of these drivers at the Monster Mile, they get rubber buildup on their cars. And that leads to some wrecks. You concur with that?
Oh, absolutely I do. You don't want to get, at every track they talk about don't get up in the marbles. The marbles kind of look like chocolate drops. They're very gooey. They roll. You get those racing slicks in them, and you're done. Very unlikely you pull out of it once you're up. Out of the racing groove is what the problem is.
It seemed like Logano learned a lesson that day, because he's not suffered a severe wreck like he did back in 09 at the Monster Mile.
I would think he did, and I don't know if we ever actually talked with him about What did he learn? We all know you don't want to get down on the apron because that can be the end of your day. Or if it doesn't end, it's the start of something big.
Where's the best spot on that track to be?
For viewing?
Really just racing. If you're Joey Logano as you're racing, or even Jimmy Johnson, where's the best place on the track for him?
The racing groove on the track is if you start at the edge of the apron and come up on the track, about 8 feet up on the track is the racing groove. The second racing groove seems to be the best at our track. And when they come out of the turns, they snap up beside the walls. And we know that most accidents are going to occur in turns 2 and 4. There's something about old turn 2 that gets them. And if 2 doesn't, 4 will.
We're going to take our first commercial break. As we're live at Jimmy's Grill, more to come with George Keller from Dover International Speedway. And welcome back. We're live at Jimmy's Grill in Bridgeville. I'm Anthony Joseph, joined by George Keller from Dover International Speedway. And George, back in 1994, Dover International Speedway, they made a change to the track surface as they went from asphalt to concrete. Why do you think that was the best move?
Well, I have pretty good knowledge about that move. Our first blacktop track lasted 17 years. For whatever reason, the second one lasted only 7. My son actually worked for the contractor that put the second one in, and I always said it was his fault. But Mr. Joseph was a man much ahead of his time in many ways. And I heard him say in the Sprint Cup garage, I'm going to fix that. So I don't know if there was anybody else in on the decision making, but Mr. Joseph made that a concrete racetrack. A year or so ago, some of my customers said, now when are you going to repave this place? I said, are you out of your mind? It's showing absolutely no sign of deterioration. You probably a couple of years ago heard how much it cost to repave Daytona International Speedway. It's 2.5 miles. We're a mile. It cost them $20 million. So would it cost us $8 or $9 million? You betcha. We don't have any intention of doing anything with that concrete racetrack. And we don't mind being one of two with Bristol.
And Bristol is the other one, as I was going to mention, is they just last year completed their repave.
And they're still repaving and fine-tuning it.
Now, the first race with that new surface, ironically, Kyle Petty won that day, and it was his final victory in the NASCAR series.
Well, I sure was pulling for Kyle to win that day. He's kind of a sentimental favorite, being Richard's son, And I can tell you that young man, when he got into victory lane, he was absolutely whipped. In fact, he was so whipped that we were worried about him, and we got oxygen in there for him. And then we could see that he was coming around, but he was absolutely worn out that day, as were the other competitors.
Is that why they changed from 500 laps to 400 laps?
Well, originally we didn't want it. We were worried about how are we going to
At the track?
It's been discussed for a very long time, and I don't foresee it happening, particularly in this financial climate that we're involved in now for the last 6 seasons. Logistically, it's not the cost of lighting the racetrack, it's the cost for safety features of everywhere else we'd have to light. And we have it.
Friday, once again, because the fans really kind of showed their support to go back to the traditional Friday.
In droves, they wanted to go back to it. We thought originally it would be a way of the Camping World Truck Series 200.
And any race fans that are interested, the races
or 1-800-441-RACE. We've got really good people that will help them get to the race.
What is the best thing about a race weekend for the fans?
Well, I'm a fan at heart, and I don't know how many big races I've seen, but Gentlemen Start Your Engine still gets to me. When I'm down on pit road, it gets real quiet, and all you hear is the hum of those engines when they start. And before that, another thing I enjoy hearing, now maybe I'm a little bit nuts as a race fan, I enjoy hearing those generators, because that's the only thing you hear as I'm walking to get up on top of the media center. And it's still exciting. And my favorite lap of any race is the second green lap, if they don't wreck on the first one, because by the second lap they're at speed, and there's just nothing like it.
Mr. Keller, we're all out of time. Is there anything you'd quickly like to add?
Well, I'd like to thank you for having me come down and be part of Catch It Live, and I've enjoyed it. And, the race, we're 2.5 weeks out now, so come on up to Dover at the end of May.
And we'll have to see if Jimmy Johnson can win his 8th.
I would say there's a high probability that Jimmy will win number 8.
We'll have to see if Matt Kenseth can get another victory. We're all out of time. Make sure you join us every Tuesday. We're live at Jimmy's Grill in Bridgeville.